Hey there, it's John Fleischman. Welcome back to Straight Talk at So Does It Matter. This is where we find people that matter in California politics and see if they'll sit with us for a few minutes and talk about things that are important. And I'm very pleased that right now our guest is Susan Shelley. Susan has a number of roles, hats that she wears. My favorite of which, of course, because I'm a super fan of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, is she's a vice president with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, focused on their communications side and getting the word out about the things that they're doing. But she's also a prolific writer, most notably with the Southern California News Group. She serves on their editorial board, and they feature regular columns from Susan, who's prolific. And I can tell you, as somebody who has spent a lot of time involved in California politics, I do a fair amount of writing myself. I learn stuff from Susan all the time. Susan has a gift at being able to take a deep dive on an issue and really dig into it and explain to people. Well, it's why my site is called So Does It Matter, which is, at the end of the day, I don't like to write things that don't come to that conclusion. Does it really matter? And every time Susan writes something, I'm like, this matters. She has
Thank
picked
you.
another topic of something that matters. So, Susan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It's great to be with you.
There's a little bit of irony. Irony is the wrong word, but this podcast kind of is a last minute decision yesterday. At least we're taping this on the morning of Thursday, June 4th. I'm not sure if it's going to run this afternoon or you may be watching it tomorrow. So this will be yesterday. It's always very confusing. But we did a kind of a Substack Live post-election analysis, and Susan was going to be my guest the whole way through. And then the internet gods conspired to keep her from getting online. So I said, hey, let's just do a podcast tomorrow, because she says, I've got notes. So Susan, what was your, let's start off, kind of more broad, and then we can get specific. What were your takeaways from election day 2 days ago?
Well, my main takeaway is that it was a very good setup for November for taxpayers. I think it was a really good election for taxpayers because there were several efforts to fool people into thinking that there had been these massive cuts in Washington to health care that were going to kill us all unless we raised the sales tax. And this has been like a template, one of these consultant-created templates where somebody did the polling and they said, okay, you ask for about 0.5%. It's temporary for 5 years. It's a general tax, but we'll tell everybody it's an emergency for healthcare. And they were so blatant with the one in Los Angeles, Measure ER. They called it Measure ER, as if it's about the emergency room. It stands for something like essential resources. No, it doesn't. They had an
Right.
ad running from the proponents that literally showed the feet of a body on a slab in the morgue with a toe tag. Pay the halfpenny or everybody dies. And I was so pleased to see that thing going down to defeat. Of course, there's many more votes to count at this point, but it
Yeah.
does
Well,
look like voters were just not fooled.
we see this happen all of the time, Susan, where state and local governments, they don't actually want you to, they don't actually tell you why they need more money. They try to always put the thing in front of you that they think you want to vote for. I was having a conversation recently. My folks, my mom and dad, live in Playa Vista, so they're in Los Angeles, and they got ballots in the mail for this property tax vote for lighting in Los Angeles, right? It's a property tax. And I was explaining to my mom, I said, look, the city of Los Angeles has plenty of money to maintain a lighting system, but they choose to spend their money on things like legal services for people in the country illegally, or dumping it into the homeless, pardon my French, dumpster fire, and all these wasteful things. But they won't come back to you and say, we need more of your tax money so that we can fund these crazy programs. What they do is they tell you that they need your money to keep the lights on. Literally, in this case, it's not even figurative. It's literally, we need you to double or triple your property tax in this assessment district. And you and I could get into all of the weeds about Prop 218 assessments and how they're rigged against the taxpayer. But at the end of the day, it's to that same point. The county of Los Angeles has lots of money at its disposal to pay for whatever it wants to. And so instead they play this game where they're like, well, we're going to go to the voters and tell them it's for some critical services. And I agree with you. I'm glad that it didn't work out. What about, there were some others too, weren't there? Not, it wasn't just ER.
There were some others, but before we leave the streetlights, you're so right about that. In 2024, the city shut down the LAPD task force going after copper wire theft. The streetlights are out because there's vandalism and theft. That's why they're out.
Right.
So instead of enforcing the law and increasing the consequences to people who are stealing copper wire and destroying the infrastructure, they're trying to raise the taxes, and they're trying to tell people it's raining, essentially. We're not
Well,
having it. So it's
and
frustrating.
let's not forget, as you by the way, you and I could spend a lot of time agreeing with each other, because the other thing you've talked about and I've talked about is how all these Faustian deals with the public employee unions. And
Mhm.
so, of course, if you look at what's going on, they want to take all of this money from the increased taxes on lighting and use it to as a big, huge jobs machine for city unions that will go out and redo all the lighting at vastly I mean, even if you needed to replace the lighting, which I guess if you're not going to protect it, you need to replace it. But even if you did that, you could contract it out for pennies on the dollar. But instead, the intention is to give a big, huge jobs program to the public workers in the city. It's the whole thing is just crazy.
One of the city council members said she suspected that it was all going to go to overtime because that's how they were structuring their work schedule. She was a little bit skeptical of the whole thing. We don't know yet whether the voters, the property owners who were voting, passed this or not. The Bureau of
Yeah,
Street
you
Lighting
do.
said,
Yeah, you do. When you go to a low information voter and say, "Look, we're not going to be able to keep the lights on unless you give us more money," they're going to vote for it. And then, as I was reading up on these Prop 218 measures, if a prop the it's a requirement to get a majority of the votes actually cast. So if somebody doesn't vote, somebody told me their vote counts as a yes.
That's true on trash fees and sewer fees, but I found out that lighting assessments, for some reason, are different. So in this particular case, only the ballots that come back count in the
Okay, so
in the
that
total. In the trash fees, you're exactly right. You need a majority of the ballots sent out to come back with a no vote. So if you throw it away, you're not a no vote, you're a yes vote.
So this is the backwards world of how they grow government. They don't need an affirmative vote to get what they want. You need to produce a negative vote to stop them.
Right.
And and then the other piece of this, which we see happen all the time, is of course one of the larger property owners in the city is the city. And
That's
so
the problem. Yes.
by the time you pair up the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, the utility districts, and all of the other adjuncts of government, and all of them act together to make sure that their votes for their property are yes in the assessment. Because, of course, if you're the city of Los Angeles and you're assessed it, it's like a shell game. You just, okay, here's the city's check for the assessment into the fund that comes back to pay for the city expenses to,
Right.
so anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on the LA city assessment. We've got people watching from all around California, and I think they're interested a little bit in what happens in Los Angeles, but I think we want to move around the state. And so, since you're with HJTA, what else did we see relative to attempted tax increases on Tuesday?
We were watching Contra Costa County, where voters apparently screamed no to another one of these sales taxes, supposedly for healthcare. Same thing, general tax. That one was 0.625%, and it was 5 years. It was right on that template, and it looked like it was going down. The last I looked, 58% no, 59%
Yeah, it
no,
was a
something
really
like
wide
that.
margin.
People are done with these scare tactics, I think, which is really important because we're going to see scare tactics on all the tax increase measures. There's more coming in November, and it's just, the world's going to come to an end if you don't pay more for essential services. What are they doing with the money you already pay? Why is
Yeah,
everything that's essential at the bottom of the list?
Yeah, and I'm going to get on my hobby horse for just a second, because I know we're about to move to tax increases or proposed tax increases that aren't tied to the federal cuts to healthcare subsidies. But I do think it's important that people understand what happened in Washington, right? So during COVID, temporary increases to healthcare subsidies were approved in a bipartisan fashion during the spendorama that took place back in 2000, when everyone was looking, how do we help people with COVID? We're shutting everything down. So everyone agreed to some temporary increases in subsidies that were intended to last till the end of 2001, I believe. And then, they on a not on a excuse me, on a partisan vote with only Democrats voting, they put a 2-year extension to the temporary increase into one of Joe Biden's signature infrastructure bills or one of those bills. And so it extended it for 2 years longer, the temporary increase. And what happened is last year the temporary increase ran out. And it's not like Congress voted to cut anything. The temporary increase ran out. There was no vote. And because of that, what's happening is that the subsidies that added to what the feds were paying reduced back to where it was before COVID. You would think that literally the federal government passed a measure to go into your house and steal your children with the way that the entitlements are just crazy. All right. It's my hobby horse. I don't know that it deserves a comment. There were other tax increases that were foiled. Let's talk about those.
I think the one in San Diego went down, Measure A. This was the
It's
vacant
going
homes
down.
or non-primary homes or whatever they ended up calling that. But the idea that people had condo units or houses that they weren't living in full time, the city of San Diego was going to try to grab some of that money. And
Bigly, they were very large potential increases, but that one also was defeated.
yes, and I think in Palos Verdes there was a huge parcel tax that was on the ballot, and it looked to me like that one was going down pretty handily. So I did see a couple of local tax increases pass where the cities, I think Lomita and Laverne, I only got as far as the L's in my notes, but I think they had some local quarter-cent or half-cent sales taxes, and those passed. The lesson here might be that when the money is going to a big area like the county of Los Angeles or this thing that's supposedly coming in the Bay Area for transit, which is 5 counties, I don't know that people want to raise the sales tax for something that they suspect they'll get no benefit from. And
Right,
I wonder if they tell you, that crack in the sidewalk you personally step over, we're going to fix that, is a more
right.
effective thing than here's a picture of a body in a morgue with a toe tag. We're all going to die if you don't raise taxes. So
Yeah,
local government has more credibility, I think, than the wider
all right.
county areas.
So we may, either purposely or not purposely, be saving the best for last, which would be in San Francisco, where over in San Francisco, there was a big, high profile, controversial proposal to impose a tax on businesses based on the pay of CEOs. They called it the CEO tax. And
Yes.
it's not just losing, it's losing by a double digit margin,
Well, that's
and
good.
that's in San Francisco. And so you just have to say to yourself, if there's actually some adult voting oversight going on in San Francisco, maybe things finally got pushed too far. I know Mayor Lurie, relative to, a politician in like a red state, he'd be very liberal, right? But in San Francisco land, he is considered to be kind of a moderate pro business mayor. And I would say that he largely has been that. The excesses by the progressive left in San Francisco, have been so bad. I joke about it and I say that if I was to open up a bagel shop in San Francisco, my first hire would not be somebody that cuts bagels. It would be a tax compliance officer who would need to come in and tell me how to sort out decades of ballot measures creating taxes on this, taxes on that, and how do you possibly stay in compliance with, it's like it's got to be the most business unfriendly place in California.
It
So,
absolutely is. And these so-called overpaid CEO taxes, there's more than just San Francisco. There were a couple proposed on ballot measures, excuse me, in Los Angeles. And these are coming from the unions. I think they're coming from SEIU, but I might be wrong about that. It might be Unite Here Local 11, the hotel unit. It might be one of those. But they're pushing these taxes based on things that are not even happening in the area. Things where how much are you paying your CEO who's based in Germany? That kind of thing. And based against some kind of calculation of what that company pays its employees in San Francisco or in Los Angeles. And it's
yeah,
just, I think it's an example of trying to use the initiative process maybe as a bargaining chip. Like the billionaire's tax might be something like that, where you had the SEIU Healthcare Workers West Union put that on the ballot to try to negotiate whatever it is that they want. But it's so destructive when you tell businesses, we're just going to grab everything you have. We're just going to take it. We're going to put something on the ballot that makes you sound like a villain. We're going to convince the voters that it's not going to cost them anything and they're going to get great benefits and they're going
Yeah,
to pass it.
I talked about a little bit yesterday. I don't know if your system got fixed or you were able to watch any of it, but I have this theory. First and foremost, obviously, the billionaire tax, which is really not even a tax, it's just a wealth confiscation, right? They're going to go in and take a chunk of somebody's post taxes net worth. So they've already paid taxes as they made their money. But I kind of see like there's a big silver lining because I think there's a lot of tax increases coming in November. Never mind, there'll probably be 1,000 of them on local ballots, but just statewide, we've got a permanent extension of the highest in the nation income tax for the state. And I think that by the time the effort to fight the billionaire tax is done, and you nailed it earlier when you talked about what is government doing with the money that it has now, when the voters are told, and it's in the context of fighting the billionaire tax, when the voters are told about the waste, the fraud, the abuse, the massive amount of money that's being spent and how ineffectively it's being spent and in the special interest in getting all that money, while that is designed to cause people to say, well, why should we vote for that tax? It's basically going after all tax increases. And we could see the billionaire tax not only be defeated by by the measures against it, but also the income tax extension. There's also several bond measures, big bond measures, which basically are tax increases by another name, right? Because you authorize the borrowing of this money, but it all has to be paid back. And now, with interest rates being as high as they are, the cost of borrowing that money is more expensive than ever. And it all comes out of the same general fund to pay, the bonds back. Maybe the billionaire tax should get, what do they say, negotiated away, although I don't know what that looks like. But if it doesn't, I really do think that healthcare workers West may have gone a bridge too far.
Well, I hope so. I hope that calling attention to the fact that we're just at the point now of pure confiscation. It's not even a tax anymore. It's just you have it, we want it, we're taking it.
Well, the most significant, having read through that in detail, although probably not as much detail as the great Susan Shelley, one of the provisions in there that I thought was the most startling, and you've probably written about this. I've probably read what you've written about this because I read all of your stuff.
Thank you.
As a subscriber to the Orange County Register, I get to see it all. But at least your news group stuff, most people don't realize this, but right now in California, there are two types of taxation that are prohibited in the state constitution. One of them, of course, is a wealth tax. You can't tax wealth. The legislature does not have the authority to pass a wealth tax right now. That's what's in front of you, is a measure that if you pass it, not only does it create a one-time wealth tax taking of 5%, but in the fine print, it now makes it legal to do a wealth tax. And so in the future, now it's a new tool in the toolbox of the special interests in Sacramento, because now, like any other kind of tax, the legislature can impose a wealth tax on anyone they want, wherever they want, because hidden in the measure is we're going to make it's not a one-time exemption. It eliminates the prohibition on a taking. Speaking of which, Susan, here's your little test. Do you know what other form of taxation is currently prohibited in the California state constitution?
Local transfer taxes, but you wouldn't know it when the courts get done with it.
That's not the right answer, but I'll let you get away with that answer.
Okay.
I know the answer to this because back in the 1980s, a state senator from Bakersfield by the name of Don Rogers decided on his own that he was really frustrated that Californians were dying and then their estates were being taxed by the state of California. So he personally championed a ballot measure to amend the state constitution to prohibit estate taxes in the state of California, which is why we don't have one. I have no doubt that at some point the Democrats will make yet another attempt to put it on the ballot. But right now, if you die in California, there's a big federal exemption. So most people listening to this would not have a federal inheritance tax. Your estate would have to be like over $14 million each. Like if your mom or dad passed away, they'd have to collectively be worth over $30 million before you'd be hit with a federal tax. And there is no inheritance tax for the state of California. So that'll be next. The fact that I'm schooling Susan Shelley on some tax lore makes me feel good. So,
Well, while we're on the subject of inheritance taxes, a lot of people felt that what was done with Prop 19, removing the parent child transfer exclusion from property tax reassessment and taking that away so that when property is passed from parents to children, it's now reassessed to market value. A lot of people feel that that's a sort of an inheritance tax because you can't afford to keep the property because the values are so high and no one can control that. That's inflation, that's craziness in California that the house that someone paid $200,000 for is worth $1 million. And people can't pay the property taxes annually on those values. And because of what Prop 19 did in removing that exclusion, people get hit very hard. And it's terrible. And I think because that was kind of in the fine print of a measure that did other things, they didn't even know they were voting on it.
oh, yeah,
And
no, it
now
has
they've
a
got it.
tremendous impact to a lot of people, especially I know that one of the groups of Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association vibrant members are people that own, if you're in Los Angeles and, your retirement investment is maybe a 6 or 8 unit apartment complex that you bought and invested in it, and now all of a sudden when you try to pass that to your children, the basis on the taxation is going to get stepped up to a level that might require you to sell the property because it no longer pencils out because of the exorbitant levels of taxes. So what other thoughts or takeaways do you want to share relative to election day? I mean,
Well, I thought it was very significant that Steve Hilton finished in the first position. I think that's very interesting. He has run an extraordinary campaign up and down the state for several years, talking with people, old fashioned retail politics and hardcore policy, talking about how to fix the energy policy, how to fix the housing policy, how to fix the tax policy. And the good news is that all of California's problems can be fixed. That's why I'm always optimistic, even though things are so awful in this state. And it just seems like everything the current government does is in the direction of making life more difficult for everybody. It can all be fixed, and it can be fixed from the governor's office. So I was very encouraged to see that people were responsive to that message. And I think in November, he will bring out, assuming that they finish counting the votes and he is in the top two, he will bring out more common sense voters, and that will be good for the voter ID measure. That'll be good for the Save Prop 13 measure that Howard Jarvis has put on the ballot. That will be good for all of the local tax measures. There are some of the craziest things that are coming to the ballot. The city of Los Angeles wants to put a 10% tax on Olympics tickets, which are, I think,
I
$2,000.
feel like there's already a tax on Olympics tickets because these service fees are
24%.
outrageous.
Yes, but that goes to LA 28, and that doesn't pay for the police. And because LA signed such a terrible deal to host the Olympics, we have no guarantee in Los Angeles that the entire cost of the games isn't going to end up on the taxpayers. LA is the guarantor of the cost of those games. So it's a terrible
And
situation.
let's be clear to everybody who watching who's not from Los Angeles, it's actually a multi-tier deal from hell because LA has a first. It's kind of like they're the first line of liability, but their liability caps at a certain point, and then if the debt exceeds that, then it's the entire state of California.
No, you have it
It's on.
backwards. The state has
Oh,
a cap. It's, I think, 270
oh, it's
million.
backwards.
Yeah, 270 million. If LA 28 can't pay its bills, then the first 270 million of overage is on the LA taxpayers. The next 270 million is on the state of California. And if
Right,
it's more than that, it's
comes
on the
back.
taxpayers of LA. That's
Yeah.
the
By the
wonderful
way,
deal we signed. Isn't that great?
well, it makes you wonder why in the hell would anybody want to host the Olympics under these kind of scenarios? And of course, the answer is the businesses all want to host it because they don't really care if the taxpayers take it in the shorts. They just want all of the business that comes and the prestige that comes to it. So we'll see about whether or not LA is ready to actually host the games. So you live in Los Angeles, city of, don't you?
Yes, I do.
What city are you in, Susan?
I'm in the San Fernando Valley. So that is city of Los Angeles.
Okay, so you had a chance to vote on election day for mayor.
Yes, I did.
Do you care to disclose who you voted for?
I voted for Spencer Pratt. I wrote about it.
All
And the
right. Well,
reason
I knew that. I was just
you're just
welcoming you
testing me.
into the conversation. What have you thought about his candidacy? And I'm going to give you the caveat, assuming that his lead holds, and that's not a sure thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of ballots left to count, and they're all going to skew more liberal. By the way, not because of ballot stuffing people. They're going to skew more liberal because a lot of Democrats were holding on to their ballots till very late, and they sent them in at the end. We can have a conversation about that, but Tell us, what do you think Spencer Pratt has had an impact on LA politics?
Oh, he absolutely has. You know, all throughout California, there's this soft language about big problems. It's not a drug problem that's on the streets. It's just because housing prices are so high. That's why you see tents. It's not, you're not seeing tents in other cities where housing prices are high. That's not it. And he has been the first person to put his name on a ballot that I'm aware of that flat out called everybody on the streets drug addicts, zombies, and he would show pictures of it and video. And you can't really argue. People are stepping over human poop in downtown Los Angeles and everywhere else in Los Angeles. This is not confined to the 50 blocks of Skid Row, not confined to that. It's everywhere in the city. And as soon as the Supreme Court made that decision in the Oregon case saying that cities can enforce an anti-camping ordinance, Mayor Bass came out the same day and said, we're absolutely not going to do that. And the county board of
Yeah,
supervisors, same thing. We're not going to do that. And
yeah, it's
this is
pretty
the
stunning.
result. Right.
Well,
So,
on election night, when I was looking at the results in Los Angeles, my first thought was, I wonder how Mayor Bass feels about the fact that nearly 2/3 of Angelinos just basically voted to give her a vote of no confidence, right? So, and then she came out and had like her, I don't know if you want to call it a victory event because she's making the general election ballot, but she came out quite contrite. She did not come out, but I think she recognizes she's got a problem. And so I think she's going to try to be a bit contrite and a little bit more humble, which is not her normal MO. We'll see if it lasts. And then I think what will happen is the public employee unions in the city, whether it's the police union all the way through to all of the non-sworn personnel, and then the allied unions like Unite 11 and some of those other unions, they're going to be the ones that take off the gloves and go after Spencer Pratt. And I guarantee you, it's all going to be Trump Pratt. Trump Pratt. We saw in the Prop 50 campaign the formula for success for Democrats. So it will be when the unions go after Steve Hilton, when the unions go after Spencer Pratt, it's all just going to be, do you want Donald Trump's candidate? Do you want Donald Trump's candidate? In the case of Steve Hilton, it's pretty easy. You know, Hilton, the president, has gone on Truth Social twice for Steve Hilton, including once on election day. And Steve Hilton himself has talked about how proud he is to be endorsed by the president, which is great. Except right now the president's not so popular with those independent voters that we need to win. So we'll see what happens. But I'm not anticipating a lot of robust general election conversation between Becerra and Hilton on the issues. Matter of fact, I think I was talking to John Phillips on KABC radio yesterday, and he theorized, and I agree, that we're going to see Becerra kind of disappear. Right? He just wants to be the generic Democrat, and he's no match for Steve Hilton when it comes to the debate stage or going back. I mean, he's just not. So,
well, we'll have to see if the people of California have had enough. There is always a point where political machines end. The Berlin Wall came down, the Soviet Union fell, nobody saw it coming. There's always a point where it changes, and it doesn't change if nobody pushes on it. And Steve Hilton is pushing on it, and Spencer Pratt is pushing on it, and they're both very effective communicators. So I don't know that it's going to work to just scream Trump, Trump, Trump the way it did with Prop 50, because Prop 50 was this arcane thing that people didn't really understand or care about,
right. And you could
the
draw it to a
congressional
national
maps.
map. You could say
Yeah.
Texas did this and da da da.
Yeah.
So, Susan, we're bumping up on a half hour, which I know is the bandwidth for the most people watching this all the way through. So, if you had a final thought for people before we sign off from this podcast, what would it be?
Final thought. Well, everything can be fixed in California. All the problems are man-made. I think the main thing we could do about affordability is fix the energy policy and pause the climate targets. That would be a tax cut for the whole state. It would be extremely effective, and I think we're moving in that direction. It looks like Tom Steyer's climate background didn't help him, and climate is not the winning issue it used to be, and I think that's the biggest connector to affordability is the climate agenda in many different areas. So that's what I hope Steve Hilton is able to address in the campaign and push that into the public consciousness, and then things will get much better in California.
All right. Last but not least, obviously, I'll help you out a little bit. If you want to find out more about the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, you would want to go to uwwhjta.org. But where else can people find if they want to? Like, Susan's so insightful. She's so amazing. Where can I read her stuff?
You
What
can
would you tell them?
You can go to dailynews.com. I write columns that are both local for Southern California and statewide and national, and they're all archived at dailynews.com. And you can be a subscriber to the Daily News or the Orange County Register and find all my stuff online there.
I'm a subscriber to the Southern California News Group papers, and I can tell you a large reason for my subscription is to be able to read Susan's stuff. Susan, thank you so much for spending time with us. Hopefully, this makes up for the snafu from yesterday. And I have no doubt that between now and November, we'll be on here again talking more about what's coming up on the ballot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be with you.